Hey, everybody. So, we're going to talk today about the number one diet that we don't recommend when it comes to gut health and IBD. So, I'm Ashley.
And hello, I'm Danielle.
We're the Crohn's and Colitis dietitians. We're here to help make navigating nutrition with IBD less stressful, more fun, less conflicting. So, let's dive in today. Today we're going to talk about a diet that's got a lot of attention over the years, the carnivore diet. So carnivore diet is not something we recommend. And we wrote an article several years back on, is the carnivore diet helpful for ulcerative colitis? And we did a long blog talking about it. It's one of our top blogs, ranked pretty high if you search carnivore diet and ulcerative colitis. And we break down some of the reasons why we don't recommend it as a dietary pattern for IBD. But ironically, as we were getting ready to start doing this video, we did a little search to find the article so we could talk about some key points in it. And something we found was quite interesting. So let me just share it here. So we did a search to see, are we still number one on this topic? And let's click directly to the article.
And I've never heard Ashley gasp like that before.
And I gasped because, and this will give you some insight into why you want to read carefully. So here we are. Depends on what you search. Sometimes we appear number one, sometimes, but definitely on first page. So is the carnivore diet good for ulcerative colitis? This extracted a one sentence that was in our article where we weren't explicitly sharing this point of view, but we were sharing that this point of view is out there. And it says the carnivore diet is one of the most promising and safe methods for relieving symptoms, which is not at all the truth. But this is why it's so important to, and when you click on it, what you'll see is that the entire article talks about why we wouldn't recommend it. So it's really ironic that this happens sometimes with blogs. It extracted a sentence in here, which we took it out. So hopefully that it will bounce back and it will not show up like that. But yeah, this is the blog that we talked about. It's one of the most commented on blogs that we have. So to see that we're showing up on Google as recommending it was really disappointing, but we're going to try and rectify that. And what's the biggest, if someone were to come to you, Danielle, and say, should I go on the carnivore diet? What's the first reason or thing you would tell them as to why that wouldn't be a great path forward?
It wouldn't be a great path forward because, as dietitians, we're all about thinking about what we can add to your gut and your day to see benefits in both your gut microbes and your overall nutrition. And the carnivore diet eliminates so many things. So it's definitely elimination heavy. And we've got, 2 food groups? We're cutting out fruit and vegetables, which are great foods for not only the gut, but to get all your nutrients in. So then it's like, well, how are you getting your vitamin C on the carnivore diet? Are you going to get scurvy? I think that's actually happened to people following the carnivore diet. So it's interesting that, people say, do the carnivore diet and then buy these supplements that I have so that you can meet your nutritional needs. To be on a diet where you're cutting out so many things, that's not what we're about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest detractions from it. And then you certainly can't ignore decades of research pointing out the importance of inclusion of fruits, vegetables, herbs, and diversity in the diet, and how important that is for gut health. And a lot of the pushback that I feel like we've gotten on those comments is like, well, I've experienced symptom relief with the carnivore diet, so you must be wrong. And we can't ignore that because symptom relief is important with IBD, but it's not the whole picture. And, you can have symptom relief and still be on a harmful path, meaning there is actual harm being caused. It is damaging. And we've definitely seen that in our practice. We've seen long-term, this is pretty, even short-term, it can be a pretty dangerous diet for people and can increase your risk significantly of not only flare-ups, but, cardiovascular concerns as well. So yeah, it's important to revisit the fact that symptom relief is only one aspect that we're looking at. We also want to look at inflammation and the impact on the overall picture. And most of everything as to what's shared is a lot of times anecdotal. So it's people sharing their experience. All that's out there in terms of research around it is case studies. There's not been large studies on it. And I think a lot of the cult like support around it really boils down to, when you get down to it, a lot of mistrust for healthcare providers, mistrust on research, and really wanting to rely on this human experience aspect of people sharing their experience and using that as the reason to try it. But there's a lot of danger to that nowadays, because we have to think about, it's the internet. It's not talking to a person one on one. The internet, you could have a bunch of comments written by bots, not even real people, which we've seen on our blog. We've also seen a lot of the same, when you start seeing the same stories over and over, that's they almost, it looks like copy paste. That's when you have to investigate and see, is this even a real person? A lot of times it's not.
It's just alarming in its own.
It is. It's important to put that into the overall context. And I think, too, the pushback I've also gotten is, well, how harmful could it be for me to just try it? And my response to that is, it can be really harmful. It is one of those diets, when you're excluding so much, it can be catastrophic. So we've seen that personally in our practice. I've seen that personally with people that I care deeply about experiencing incredible harm from it, and hospitalizations, and I mean, the list goes on. It is harmful, and that's not talked about when people are sharing all these stories. It's not talked about how this impacts them years down the road or months down the road. They're not going back and commenting and saying, actually, don't do it. But to that point, though, there was one of the people that promoted it a lot years ago when it first started, did actually come back and say, actually, I don't recommend it anymore. I can't remember his name. Do you remember?
Well, actually, like Paul Saladino was always the big carnivore guy, the carnivore MD. And yeah, he was all about carnivore diet. And then he was on a podcast saying that he wouldn't recommend it. So I think he's added in more fruits and maybe honey into his diet now, but he is still largely animal based. So it's almost like it's a carnivore 2.0.
Yeah, I've heard people talking like that too, and they're like, oh, it's animal based. But we can't ignore the fact that you're including herbs and veggies and oil, like helpful stuff that balances out some of the other stuff that, not as great at high amounts. So, and I think it is important to clarify, like we always say, it always depends on the context. Carnivore diet could be meat, butter, and cheese only. Someone else's interpretation could be like omega-3 rich fish and, inclusion of herbs. And at that point, you have to argue, is it really the carnivore diet, or are you eating a Mediterranean style diet, but calling it something else? So I do think that there's a lot of those things in the conversation that it's like, hey, it really depends. But the way that we most hear talked about is kind of this other way, which is exclusion of a lot of things and using butter, meat, and cheese as the core element, which we know is not going to be helpful long term.
Yeah, if anything, for those listening, when we have a diet high in those foods, not only are we killing our gut microbiome, we're not setting our 80-year-old self up for a good time. What I mean by that is when we're not able to get this variety of plants in our diet, there's that potential for, this is a word that always scares me, but colon cancer, right? When the diet is high in red meats and processed meats, those foods are linked to colorectal cancer. And we know that fiber and actually beans too can work wonders to help the gut out. So those are the things that I kind of get scared of for people, because I feel like they've been wrongly misled. And to talk too about kind of what you said earlier, Ashley, no one ever really talks about the negative effects of it. Well, just mentioning that. And then there's an Instagram page, what is it called? Carnivore Cringe.
We're cringe, yeah.
where they talk about all of the rough things that have happened to people. And this isn't even in the long term, this is in the short term. So we can only imagine 20 years down the road, what is the carnivore MD going to look like health wise?
Yeah. And not to mention, I feel like the other cult like behavior with this trend is that there's a reliance on forums and there's reliance on if you're not thinking this way, then you're wrong. It must be your fault. And I think we
Right.
see that a lot of times on the forum where people will come in and say, "Oh no, my cholesterol is up and my like this is now happening to me and I feel terrible." And the responses are like, well, you're not on it long enough. Are you cheating? Or, it's very much throw it back on the person. And that is scary, I think, too. It's scary to think that then that person feels guilt. And potentially in these situations, we have to look at them kind of like a cult because they can be, and there can be a little bit of rigidity and brainwashing in it all where and you're getting your information from this source and maybe from people that you feel community with and then you're being told stuff like that and so there's a lot of guilt and shame and you keep going and keep trying and I think we do see a lot of harm with that not just physically but also like the mental health aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, because we have IBD, we can understand why someone would do whatever it takes to see symptom reduction. And that's one of the things that a lot of people have reported when they complete or do the carnivore diet is that they may see an initial reduction in IBD symptoms. And is that exciting? Yeah, it is. Is it great for your long term health? No, it's not. And symptoms, much like we've said many times on this channel, the absence of symptoms does not mean that there isn't inflammation.
Right, it
And I
doesn't mean
would,
you're decreasing your disease at all.
yeah, yeah. And that's the picture we don't know from these forums or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you feel better, but where's your inflammation at?
Yeah,
Um, so, I mean, I guess that's one pro of the carnivore diet that you would feel potentially a little bit better. Um,
but so can if you were to eliminate everything out of your diet or anytime you eliminate stuff that causes symptoms you get symptom relief but you're not going to go your whole life with not eating anything.
yeah.
That's kind of what I boil it down to. Symptom relief you can get that from all sorts of dietary patterns but it's not about that. It's also about we want improvements long term.
Hmm.
But and I think about too what you just said about how you can understand the feelings behind that. I can too. And I almost know exactly if it were me how I might get to this point of feeling like I have to rely because I think with rely on other people's insights to cope. And
Hmm.
I've definitely been there too. It when I was first diagnosed, I even as a dietitian or soon to be dietitian at the time when I was diagnosed, I went to my GI and my first GI and said, "Hey, I want to learn about how to use nutrition to help improve my disease outcomes," and was immediately dismissed, which is was really hard. Really hard. And even as a soon to be dietitian was like, well, this is so contradictory to like what I'm learning.
Hmm.
I'm learning about how to use nutrition to treat, and you're telling me it doesn't even matter. So there's that element of it. And it's almost like telling the person their feelings don't matter and how because at the time I was struggling to eat anything. So does that not matter? And it felt like it didn't matter to them. And so, of course, there's a little mistrust in that and a missed opportunity on a healthcare provider side because they could have referred me to a dietitian to one, help me make sure I'm getting enough because we know how important it is. When someone's malnourished, they don't respond to medication as well. And that's from actual research on this. Like we know that people respond better to meds when they're more nourished.
Hmm.
So I can definitely see how people get to that point of I I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody that cares.
Mm-hmm.
and somebody steps in on a forum and is like, "Hey, I care. Let me take you along with me." I mean, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to give those people a hug.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do. I feel that deeply because I know what it's like to walk in those shoes. And as much as we get a lot of these, we get a lot of negative comments on that blog because we're talking about the dangers of it. But I feel deeply for everybody on there. And for the people who are going to comment on this video telling me why I'm wrong, I care about you. I do. And it's definitely a personal topic for me because one of the reasons I started my practice was because my cousin went through IBD, and I watched him go to a lot of these same forums to get advice and support, and I watched him experience the dangerous effects of it. And so for me it is personal because I lost him to all of it. And so yeah, it's personal and it can be dangerous, and I think that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. It's personal and it's powerful, and we want more people to see the full picture behind carnivore so that you don't get sucked into the, dare I say, the cult of it all.
The cult of carnivore.
Yeah, I may regret saying that, but yeah, it honestly, like you said, Ashley, comes from a place of caring because we can see how doing this for a long time can progress into something that's not beneficial for one's health. I don't know about you, but I want to do what I can for my health. I want 80, 90-year-old Danielle to still be kicking and doing what she does. And that starts with not doing the carnivore diet.
Yeah,
Oh man. But yeah, are we missing anything else on the carnivore diet?
I don't think so. But I hope that your takeaway is that we're sharing this with you because we care and because we've seen the harm that this version of the diet can do to people, and we don't want that for the larger context of people with IBD. And there are easier ways to get some symptom relief without all of this other stuff. I know diets always sound really cool, and there's a lot of diets out there, but at their core, some of them can be very culty if you get very polarized about them and are able to see the larger picture. So just keep that in mind as you navigate the world of diets.
And also, just to one quick thing, we like to base our recommendations on what the scientific literature says.
Yes.
And as of right now, we don't have that on the carnivore diet. We just have anecdotal evidence, and that doesn't compete with the scientific literature. So,
Yeah.
from that and the fact that even though we haven't met you, we don't want this for you, we care about you. Let's talk about it more, and we're here to support you in any way that we can.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming on this 20-minute journey, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.